Joining us now is Eva Guzman, Republican candidate for Attorney General. Now, Eva, you have a unique story. You're the only woman running, and you're also the only one to have served in the Supreme Court, the Texas Supreme Court, of course. So tell us about your personal story and how that's going to be shaping your campaign.
So I'm very proud to run for Attorney General. I follow in the footsteps of some of the best Attorney Generals that have served the state of Texas. John Cornyn and Greg Abbott were judges before they were Attorney General. I've been a judge for about 22 years. I was a trial court judge and disposed of thousands of cases on that court. Then I was an appellate court judge in one of the busiest appellate courts in the state, in the country for that matter, for a decade, and on the Supreme Court for almost 12 years. So I bring experience that no other candidate in this race has.
Got it. And, you know, ideologically speaking, all four of the candidates for Attorney General, you're all pitching yourselves as conservative fighters. So what exactly differentiates your fight for the conservatives compared to the other opponents?
My proven track record. I've been on the bench 22 years. I've been on the ballot. This is probably my sixth time, maybe more than that if you count the primary and the general. I've been supported by conservative groups throughout my 22-year career, whether it's fighting for the unborn, being a voice for our children, whether it's securing the border, whether it's election integrity, whether it's upholding the Constitution. I'm the one with a proven track record over 2 decades of supporting our Constitution and upholding conservative values.
Right, and that's definitely something that the other three can't say that they've done. When Governor Greg Abbott was Attorney General, he proudly described his typical workday as go into the office, sue the federal government, and go home. And Ken Paxton has very much continued that same rhetoric of constantly suing the Biden administration and trying to stop his federal orders. What do you see as the most important role of the Attorney General's office? Will you follow that same path?
Texas is hiring a lawyer. Texans deserve a first-class Attorney General's office with first-class legal advocacy. That's an office with over 4,000 employees. 750 of them are attorneys. They handle 33,000 cases a year, over 117 field offices. It's a $2 billion budget per biennium. They collect $4 billion in child support. 60% of the work of that office is child support. I will sue the Biden administration on day one. But I will also do the day in and day out work of the Attorney General's office. Under a General Guzman Attorney General's office, you will see a leader who's dedicated to restoring integrity and to restoring that first-class legal advocacy. Unlike any of the other folks running for this race, I actually understand how judges think. I understand how to identify legal issues, and I've unpacked very complex constitutional questions for over 2 decades. No one brings to this job that experience, and the people of Texas deserve an Attorney General who has integrity, experience, a commitment to upholding the Constitution, and that's not new for me. That's the way I've lived my life.
And are there any specific political issues that you differ from your opponents on?
The good thing about being a judge and coming to this job with my experience is that I take a look at every issue with fresh eyes. And the only thing that's guided my decisions over the last 22 years is the Constitution. And that's what's going to guide my decisions here. I will always stand up for Texas, and I'll stand up for the unborn. I'll stand up for a secure border, and I will stand up for the rule of law.
You've been in the past critical of Attorney General Ken Paxton. He was under indictment even during the last election and still won. Do you think you can convince voters this time around that he is not the candidate for them?
I want voters who really want a first-class Attorney General's office, who care about things like integrity and respect to the rule of law, to understand that Ken Paxton was accused by 7 of his hand-chosen attorneys. These are people he picked. These are conservative lawyers. This is not the Democrats coming over Ken Paxton. These are his hand-chosen attorneys with lives and careers and families. And they went to the FBI and they said, my boss, I believe, is guilty of criminal wrongdoing. The people of Texas deserve an attorney general who can win in November. Ken Paxton, with one indictment, barely won his last election. I think it was under 3 percentage points. He is not our candidate for the Republican nomination. We need an attorney general with proven experience, with integrity, and who actually cares about upholding the rule of law. Anybody can lose their way. Maybe Ken has, but you don't get to be the top legal officer in the state.
That being said, do you think he should resign?
Yes, I do. For the good of the people of Texas, as Congressman Chip Roy said in October of 2020, it is time for Ken Paxton to resign and focus on his own legal woes and issues and his defense, frankly, because he's going to need it.
The Trump administration, the Trump endorsement rather, is still coveted by the Republican Party, especially when it comes to primaries. And Trump endorsed Paxton just barely after you entered this race. Do you see that as a loss you have to make up for, or how do you see that kind of playing a role in this in your campaign?
In 2016, I became the highest vote getter in the history of the state of Texas. Eva Guzman, a Latina in a Republican Party, setting records, more votes than Ken Paxton, Donald Trump, all of the rest of them. And so in this race, I'm asking Texas voters to take a look at my record, to take a look at how I've upheld the Constitution, and to evaluate your candidates based on their record. I am respectful of endorsements. It is good when leaders speak up, but at the end of the day, every Texan walks into the ballot box for themselves. And I'm asking you to make the decision about your candidate. I'd like to be your candidate. I'd be honored to represent Texas.
Paxton has the incumbent advantage, and George P. Bush obviously has the family name behind him. How are you planning on working around those kind of built-in advantages that both of those candidates have?
That's been my whole life. I worked in a factory as a teenager, and I made my way from that factory to the Supreme Court of Texas. I'm used to overcoming adversity, and I'm used to overcoming dynasty names and overcoming incumbencies, which, frankly, it's time. It's not insurmountable, and I believe Texans really care about having another attorney general that walked the walk that's very similar to Governor Greg Abbott, a very conservative walk, and no place prepares you better for doing the job of the attorney general than the job of a judge. It's judgment after all, and we know how one of these candidates has exercised the judgment put in his hands. Ask the people of San Antonio who care about the Alamo. Ask the people of Houston who are depending on those Harvey GLO funds to keep their homes safe from flooding. Ask the veterans who've experienced the housing crisis under one of these candidates.
Speaking of Bush, you've obviously been critical of his qualifications for his job, for this job rather. He's currently serving as the General Land Office Commissioner, as you mentioned. So why else do you think that you are the better option over Bush?
Experience, proven judgment, sound judgment. Mr. Bush had not activated his law license for over a decade. While he was not practicing law, I was teaching judges and lawyers how to be better at their jobs. I taught at the University of Houston. I've taught judges through CLEs all over the state. If you visit my website, evaguzman.com, you'll see another component where I am far superior to the other candidates, and that's public service. That's actually caring about veterans. You will see awards that have been, very humbly speaking, where I've been recognized for my work on behalf of veterans, on behalf of victims of domestic violence. I chaired and led the Supreme Court of Texas's Children's Commission, and we took steps to change the outcomes for those almost 30,000 children in the child welfare system. I am a proven leader, but beyond that, I actually care about my state. I've worked in public service, devoting my time, my energy, my talent to people who would not have a voice, but for the voice, those of us in a position to give them a voice, give them.
If you do win the primary and then go on to win the election, what will your biggest priorities and the first things you will tackle as AG?
So the first priority is to restore integrity, that first-class legal advocacy. As I said, Ken Paxton, under his administration, we lost real talent in this state. There are lawsuits that were previously being handled in the Attorney General's office that have now been outsourced to private attorneys, fine private attorneys. But when you outsource the work of the state of Texas, the people of Texas lose. So I will restore the team. I will take a deep dive into the child support system. And I will take a hard look at every division. There's 33 divisions or so in the Attorney General's office. They deserve a leader with sound judgment, a leader who cares about the day-to-day work of that office, whether it's human trafficking, consumer fraud, child support, protecting state agencies. They deserve an attorney that's going to take a look at that, and an attorney who will take a look at it through one lens, and that's, is this constitutional or not, and are we serving Texans? That's the job. The job is not about giving press conferences gratuitously. It's about service, and I will serve Texans.
All right. Eva Guzman, thanks so much for joining us on State of Texas.
Thank you. It's so good to be here. Thank you very much.
Thanks.